If you've visited even a small farm, you've no doubt noticed that agriculture tends to leave behind quite a few artifacts. And in a city that stood on the grain shipping route from the Great Lakes through the Erie Canal back in the 1800s, the artifacts are still standing and still astoundingly huge. And even after being warned of impassable roads and rats and vermin, our Jason Schultz went to explore the fascination surrounding Buffalo, New York's mammoth abandoned grain elevators.
I often hear people say, oh, tear them down, they're so ugly. And on the other hand, people say, no, they're beautiful.
Along the banks of the Buffalo River stand symbols of a city's history. Towering structures built to store millions of bushels of goods from the Heartland. Explore what was once called Elevator Alley, and you get a sense of just how quickly Buffalo, New York's grain elevators were abandoned.
The windows are broken, metal rusted all around these elevators, but what a testament to the engineering and design that a belt system designed and used in 1906 was used as recently as 2001.
But a unique aroma serves as a reminder that this area is not completely forgotten. On some days, the smell of Cheerios cereal fills the air, emanating from the giant General Mills elevator and factory. ADM and General Mills own the only two operating grain elevators here. Positioned on the edge of Lake Erie, after construction of the Erie Canal, Buffalo became the transfer point for boats carrying grain from the Midwest via the Great Lakes.
Up until that time, anything that went to the markets from the Midwest had to go through New Orleans. That was 3,000 miles that they had to travel.
Professor Linda Schneekloth has studied the history of Buffalo's grain elevators. After the Erie Canal opened in 1825, it didn't take long for Buffalo to go from a town of 2,400 to a booming industrial city. In fact, by the turn of the century, Buffalo was the 6th largest port in the world. At its heart were the grain elevators, towering silos with mechanized scoops designed to store tens of thousands of bushels of grain. By the 1930s, the city was not just a giant stopover for wheat and corn. Buffalo was milling more flour than any other city in the United States. But Buffalo's heyday was about to end.
The death knell for Buffalo was the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1969. And frankly, nobody had to stop in Buffalo any longer. And so at that point, within a very, very short period of time, almost all of the milling operations and the storage operations moved out of the city.
One by one, elevators closed, mills shut down. Hundreds lost their jobs. Buffalo's economy all but collapsed.
People were at work one day, and then they were all told that they were laid off, and everything just got laid on the ground, and that was it. People literally just left.
Where some see cracking concrete and rusting metal, Rick Smith sees opportunity. The Buffalo businessman recently purchased 5 deteriorating grain elevators on 20 acres. His plan? Build an ethanol manufacturing plant right in the middle of those elevators.
Within 500 miles, we've got 73 million people, so most guys were putting ethanol plants in the middle of fields, which is close to the source of the raw material needed to make ethanol, but we're close to the place where it needs to go.
It's an ambitious idea that not everyone here is sold on, but Rick already has a team of people working on breathing life back into these long-forgotten grain silos.
Everything in here is covered with dust.
Dust and a little bit of rust, but we're trying to fix both of them.
And you're going to be able to make all this stuff work for present-day ethanol.
We've had all this equipment run.
Jim Watkins is the operations manager.
So what is this here, Jim?
This is one of the mobile marine legs that we have. We have 2 of them at Lake and Rail. There are 5 of them on the complex. And back in the days of using the scoopers, these are the legs that were utilized. They had a leg that would come down and get into the hold, and that would be what would move the grain up. And after all this time, structurally it's still in very good shape. The cosmetics aren't, but structurally it is.
Sturdy construction outside and inside as well. Unfortunately today, the electricity was not working.
How many stories?
It's 109 feet. I don't know what that would be in stores.
No elevator, no lights. So to get to the top of this structure, we had to climb in the dark.
But we just came up 110 feet. I need to stop and catch my breath. I'm an old man.
Now we're above all of these
Yes,
elevators.
now we're on what's called the bin floor. And as before we had the 37,000 bushels above us, we're now standing on top of the 37,000 bushels.
So we're going over the top of the...
We're going over a roadway, and we're probably about 130 feet above it right now.
Wow.
But it is a pretty neat thing.
We're up higher than the elevators right now.
Yes, yes.
That's a long way down, Jim.
Yes, it is. We'll keep you away from the edge.
Our last stop on this tour of past and potential is the roof of the elevator, about 120 feet up. From here, the perfect vantage point for views of downtown Buffalo, the skyline in one direction, the other a view of what once was, and the choices and challenges facing this city.
That's always the question. Is what do you do with those big things? We have a very divided community at some level about whether the grain elevators are wonderful or whether they're not. I personally have an idea that I think you just leave them. They don't tear down castles in Europe just because there's no use for them. You know, they leave them. One could argue is that maybe their use is just that they stand there and remind us.
The grain elevators in Buffalo, New York bear witness to one thing: the impact of change. Even towering concrete structures with firm foundations are at the mercy of progress. Their history is as important as their future is uncertain. The sentinels of a city.